Welcome to Panther and Cage.
Do you know how many
I actually, no, shut up.
No.
Can you shut your mouth for a minute?
No.
Because I actually work in the ghetto. I see the people.
Do you know why they're in that
I
position?
see these people.
Do you understand the systematic and historical reason for why they're in that position?
They don't care. All they want to do is be ghetto.
No.
Yes, there's some
No.
that don't, and there's good people.
No.
Most of them just want to suck off the system or do something bad like drugs or gangs. And that's all
They have been oppressed. They have not been given the same opportunities you have had.
They do, and there's plenty of black people.
No, they don't, Dad. And you not
minorities.
recognizing that as an issue is the reason why it's still continuing today.
I see them all over. There's all kinds of successful people that are of color. It doesn't matter what color, brown, white.
But it's a lot harder for them to get to that
It doesn't
position.
matter. When they do, they're fine. But there's always filthy animals. And that,
You're calling people of color black animals. You're calling them animals. Are you kidding me?
You didn't let me finish.
That's not okay. No matter what, that's not okay. No matter what, it's not okay. Racism is not okay. Why do you think that racism is okay? All right, here.
Oh, that's mine.
Really, I'm gonna look at.
King.
King.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever and forever Wakanda.
Ah, man, I'm interested. Why did she ask? Why didn't they answer that question? You know, why did they think racism was okay? Don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot in that video to take in. But we starting with the intro or we going in?
Yeah, go ahead. Start with the intro, baby.
All right. Hey everybody, welcome to Panther and Cage, where we believe there is no such thing as a dumb question. I'm your host, Cage, and adjacent to me is my extraordinary co-host, an astute analyst and pundit, a student of humanity and poignant propagator of true freedom. He is a malcontent of American inequity and my esteemed colleague, Panther. Panther and Cage is a vlogcast where we speak on a variety of topics from an Afrocentric point of view. If this is your first time joining us, hello, and I hope you enjoy. Panther, let me pass it to you.
All right. As always, and for the foreseeable future, Panther and Cage will remain an interactive vlogcast. It has been absolutely essential that our audience understand that this vlogcast didn't happen without them. So it is their need. It was their need that inspired our journey so far. Panther and Cage appreciates all feedback. So whether you comment, like, or share the live stream, it doesn't go unnoticed. Cage, my intelligent, astute, confident, politically diligent, and cognitively unparalleled co-host to my left, has helped to elevate the conversation. He's elevated the culturally inept and unconscious conversation that began with Black people don't deserve reparations to the intellectually informative efforts to reveal systemic racism for our Brevard County community. And that has not been easy. But the conversation and changing of the negative narratives in the community has at least forced a great deal of cowards into what we have predictably practiced, who have predictably practiced cognitive dissonance and retreated into their own little shared bubbles of ignorance and religious zealotry. And while we have discussed tangible steps towards equitable treatment and theoretical solutions, we've made an optimistic and encouraging endeavor to rediscover the impact and the influence that historical ethnocentricity has imprinted upon American subculture. These conversations aren't meant to intimidate you, but they're not meant to intimidate anyone. They are truly meant to get to the heart about topics that have been meant to politically and ethically divide Americans. I personally hate to see or experience American inequity and become excited to pick up the sword of truth and sever the avarice inspired bigotry, cultural obliviousness that challenges us to consider judging each other and mediocre approaches meant to perpetuate the substandard beliefs unfounded by principles of faith or just plain common sense. I hope that our audience contributes to our efforts in changing the negative narratives that hurt the minorities and embrace methods of uniting each other for a collective cultural well-being. Cage, you want to touch on what we were going to talk about with tonight's topic?
Well, certainly. Last time on Panther Cage, we got into the origins and meanings of some good old American slurs and epithets. Behind every word is a story, a history, sometimes legend and myth. And this couldn't be any truer for the etymology or creation of a racial epithet or slur. If you missed our last episode, go to Panther and Cage on Facebook and check that out. Tonight, we're going to hit you with some more epithets, some more origins, and some more of that classic Americana, which is exactly what Black history is a part of. All right. Where we going with it next, Panther?
Someone said you got echo.
Nothing I can do about it. I even got the headsets in.
Yeah, if you hear yourself, it's probably reverberating.
I don't hear
Either way.
myself.
Let's go ahead and get to all right, let's get to the first one for tonight. The first one tonight is actually going to be about animals, or what we see as subhuman, anything beast-wise that is subhuman. That includes the racial epithet or the racial stereotype of the coon, the brute, anything that made us like beasts or monkeys or apes, gorillas. We covered apes and gorillas last Panther and Cage. So we just wanted to kind of talk about this young Haley Clark who debates the historical systemic racism with her parents. And in doing so, her father calls us filthy animals. He calls people of color filthy animals. This goes with the whole denigrating a group of people and referring to them as animals, making it easier to conduct some of the disparative or some of the destructive behavior towards a group of people and justifying it. I think I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the video so that everyone can see this, those who haven't seen this video.
All right, oh, that's mine.
Really, I'm gonna look at. No, I'm looking at statistics right now. Your statistics they can be warped. Statistics can be warped. You want me to show you videos? Do you want me to show you videos of cops? I will do it. Statistics wrong? Because they can be warped. I'm not giving statistics right now. They can be warped. Personal experiences can't. No, because this is actually putting it into play. Do I need to show you a bunch of videos of cops attacking protesters, peaceful protesters? Listen to this. This is the number. You mean I'm informed and educated? You're not, though. Yes, I am. You're one-sided informed. Yes. Mom, I was watching political stuff, and you said to turn that off because you don't want to hear about it. That means that I am educated on it, and you are not. I'm sick of hearing it. The fact that you can have that ignorance for the majority is bliss. Okay. Ignorance for the minority is destruction. That are wrong. This is just pure wrong information out there. Just give me the statistic. In 2017, 457 white people were shot to death by the police in the United States. Okay. 223 were black. 76% of the population is white. 13% is black. If they were being killed at the exact same rate by police officers, the rate of black people being killed would be 8.9. But it's not. It's 24%. The rate of white people being killed should be about where it is. So they're being killed at a higher rate. There's more white people, meaning that the amount of people killed by cops who are white would be higher. The reaction of the person. I'm not saying they're tired of being treated that way. I'm not saying it's right. Good. But if they started teaching them that this is the world that we live in. You don't want to be killed. Why do you think your friend's father taught him that? So his black son doesn't end up dead like Tamir Rice. Because he doesn't want him to grow up with a chip on his shoulder that he doesn't want his black son to end up dead. Exactly. That's not okay. Why do you think that's okay? Because why is it something that you're okay with? Why is it a reality that you're okay with? I'm okay with it. But you are. No, I'm not. Stand against it. So stand against it. If you're not okay with it, so stand against it. Stand against it? When the black people in the ghetto stop carrying an illegal weapon. When the black people in the ghetto stop murdering each other. I'll start caring about cops when they stop killing black people. I'll start caring about black people when they stop killing cops.
Boy, did that conversation drill down to that went to nothing. Wow. So Haley's mother blames the death rate disproportionality on our reaction, on people of color's reaction. And from there, they decided to just go tit for tat in an argument that literally was drought. It was dead. There's a lot to unpack with this video, everybody, and I'm not going to sit here and unpack the entire video or break it down. The point of showing you that video was the attitudes that collectively make the assessment that black people are animals, and the reasons you hear the ghetto, they just want to suck off the system. So there's a lot to unpack with that. We're not going to unpack with that. We just want to show evidence as to some of the racial epithets that are used, and black people are commonly referred to as animals. You have anything you want to say about that, Case, before we move forward?
I don't know, because I think it was something I wanted to talk about last time. In one of the
Yeah, I think you turned your volume down or something.
Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you. Your in-call volume may be down.
Can you hear me?
I think you're louder now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right. All right. One more. All right. Sorry for the deadness, guys. It's got a really bad echo. I've tried everything to get rid of this echo, guys. I'm even plugged in, so I don't know. Maybe you can just go to the next one.
You still want to fix it, or you want me to go ahead and carry it to the first racial epithet?
I tried turning it down. I tried plugging it in. I don't know what to do, bro.
All right, you go ahead and fix it. I'll go ahead and carry us into the first racial epithet. This one is a favorite. This one has been wanted by several people. People have asked me about this. I think I've gotten a total of three different people asking for this, requesting for this one. So we're finally here. We're here at this moment. So this one is a very special racial epithet, has become a racial epithet. I talked about the pickaninnies back in, I believe it was 7.5 or 8.0. We talked about the pickaninnies, the stereotypes, and the zip coons, the mammy. We talked about plantation plates. And in that, we talked about the pickaninnies, and we talked about a very, very famous pickaninny, which was the name, which was Buckwheat from the Little Rascals. It used to be our gang and transformed into the Little Rascals. So Buckwheat was the second. I think there were only two black pickaninnies on the show, but Buckwheat turned out to be the most popular. And that term pickaninny kind of went out because of the popularity of Buckwheat, and Buckwheat became the pickaninny. So that term was popularized. Now, this term of Karen, along with others that we're about to learn about, became popularized, and this started about 2017, 2018, and this is going to be a long series of videos, not a long set, but about 4 of them. So I want you to catch all this information. All this is up for grabs. So if you guys have any questions, any comments, whatever, go ahead and put them in there. We'll stop as in between points in the video, and we'll have the discussion if you need to have the discussion. But I think this is where we get rolling, guys.
What's a Karen? Why is it everywhere, and where did it come from? This is the origin of the Karen meme. When most people think of Karen, an image of a white lady with Kate Gosselin's 2008 haircut comes to mind.
And has evolved from someone entitled who has a specific style haircut and always wants to speak to the manager if they don't get their way, to something a little more complex and higher stakes.
Karen has come to represent a white, entitled woman who is capable of causing harm to people around her, in particular people of color.
So they tried to walk right here and she blocked them.
Get access.
Yell at me some more.
River.
Okay, Karen.
A hysterical middle-aged woman with a complete lack of awareness of her privilege. Why is Karen middle-aged? Well, the name's fallen in popularity. As of 2018, it sits at 637th for U.S. girl names. Karen was consistently in the top 10 list in the 50s and 60s. So today, there are a lot of Karens in their 50s and 60s.
Growing up, it seemed like all of my friends' parents were named Karen, my teacher was named Karen. I didn't know a single other Karen my age.
But why aren't we dissing other names of that era? Why not Linda or Susan? There are some theories on why this name in particular became the inspiration for this character archetype. Some Redditors point to Ray Liotta yelling at Karen in the 1990 film
Karen,
Goodfellas
where's the stuff that I left? Karen?
as the inspiration for the idea that Karens are infuriating.
Karen!
I feel like Dane Cook made Karen a thing 15 years ago.
Every group has a Karen, and she's always a bag of douche.
A clearer connection to the modern-day meaning of Karen can be found in the 2004 film Mean Girls, when the airy Karen asks,
So you're from Africa. Why are you white? Oh my god, Karen, you can't just ask people why they're white.
It's also possible Mean Girls writer Tina Fey used the name Karen because it was already in the public consciousness. It's really a what came first, chicken or the egg situation. But long before the name Karen became a pejorative, the character type had long been recognized by another name. According to Georgia Tech professor Andre Brock, during the time of slavery, Black people used to refer to a white woman exerting undue power over them as a Miss Anne. Even after slavery, there was a general fear among the Black community that a white woman could easily make a false or exaggerated accusation and send a lynch mob after any particular Black man.
That's interesting because what we're going to talk about in between that time, apparently your mic is fixed, Cage, is nearly 25% of the lynching of African Americans in the South, that's just in the South, were based on charges of sexual assault. Okay, the incredibly broad definitions of the black on white rape in the South required no allegation of force due to white institutions, laws, and a white consensus about consensual sex with an African American man. Now, this was enough to incite riots, incite mob rule. So this fear of an overbearing white woman was placed in the status of the African American existence in America. So we want to talk about where this leads to. Okay, we talked about frontier justice, and we talked about the lynching and the fear of interracial sex and the lynchings that it caused. We expressed a unique, in-depth look into this in two different forms when we talked about some of the systematic issues that we're facing this country, and when we talked about lynching specifically. So we talked about this term frontier justice, which was used when vigilantes would take into the law their own hands and then decide to punish another person without the legal authority. In the 1800s, these groups illegally dispensed what was known as frontier justice, and they used to hold trials. And I do remember Coach Kodine talking about the carpetbaggers and I think he was talking about these accused horse thieves, these rustlers, these cattle rustlers, these shooters, and in some cases, Negroes. They promptly would hang them and torture them if they were convicted. So this issue is where we get into a deeper issue. And that deeper issue is going to deal with the slave patrols, okay? Now, what we're going to find is these slave patrols were, coming from legislation or coming from laws that were passed in 1850, I believe it was. And this was used to hunt slaves, runaway slaves. Now, this legacy was carried down and became habit. So much so that what we see here to my left is frontier justice. This is the reason why they would get together and form a mob or a posse, and they would hunt down any sort of slave or even if it was a freed slave, they would find ways to hunt these people down. So this ochlocracy happened from Minnesota to Alabama, as you can see. This is the evidence. I do believe that's Minneapolis, Minnesota at the very top in the north. You see the foot of the slave or the foot of the black man just dangling there. And then you can see the two bodies hanging below in the Alabama. So this isn't just a thing of the South. That's what I want to express to everyone. It's important that you know this is a lot of information to unpack, but I need to be very specific here. This is the point of talking about this portion. This was the North, this was the South. This is not exclusive to one area. So I need everybody to understand that. So when we do talk about these things of systematic oppression, systematic discrimination, and racial hatred, I don't want anyone to miss the boat on that conversation. All right, this is meant to bring about participation, and we love the feedback. So. I would like to recall how in Panther and Cage 6.5, we talked about the lynchings in the Reconstruction period of America and how they were based not even on the physical or tangible evidence of forceful sexual harassment and or assault, but just the allegation of rape. So based on a conditioned fear of interracial sex, white women often racialized allegations to create a response that was referred to as frontier justice. This form of justice was indeed illegal and indicative of a preference to dispense a perversion of American justice. It was vigilante justice, and this Karen-like behavior seeks to use privilege to influence modern-day lynching behavior when unnecessarily contacting law enforcement.
Given the Black community's history of interacting with the stereotype and the popularity of the name Karen in a certain age bracket, Black people started commonly referring to these types of women as Karens. Although the timeline is nebulous, the rise of smartphones and social media further spread and popularized the term.
Has anyone ever called me a Karen pejoratively? I don't think so, but I really wouldn't know.
I think I don't fall into the middle-aged, entitled white lady category that Karens are usually associated with. So no one's ever called me Karen pejoratively.
Toward the end of the past decade, people were filming and posting more incidents with Karens. It was common for each woman perpetuating the incident to get her own alliterative nickname. For example, in 2018, there was Permit Patty, a woman who called the cops on an 8-year-old black girl selling water without a permit. There was Barbecue Becky.
This lady right here wants to sit here and call the police on them for having a barbecue at the lake as if this is not normal.
She's like, it's against the law. I'm going to go home and call the police. I'm like, you know what? Do what you want to do. I've been here 42-something years. I know where I can and cannot barbecue.
I was walking by and I saw her harassing him and stopped. He has done nothing. He's been sitting there chilling the entire time. He was really aggressive towards him.
It's nothing to do with their race. It seems like a new Jim Crow going on because for some reason, every time I see it, black people are the ones targeted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
All right, Miss Ann. It's still got that echo, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me throw another video up. Let you go ahead and fix it, and we'll come back to it after this. We'll let you start talking about Miss Ann.
Are you filming me?
Okay, Karen.
Karen incidents often include a Karen unnecessarily contacting the police. The Karen meme graduated from popularity to virality with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic and the reinvigoration of the Black Lives Matter civil rights movement. Google Trends for Karen from the last 12 months show an increase in searches starting around middle to late March. The coronavirus version of the Karen meme became particularly poignant in the hellscape of 2020.
Where'd you get that mask from?
This Karen refuses to wear a face mask in public or in stores, harasses service industry workers, and spreads COVID-19 conspiracy theories.
She is the manager.
I am rich. Something you've never seen.
Bye, Karen.
The most Karen-y Karen, however, is Amy Cooper, a New Yorker who called the cops and said a black bird watcher was threatening her life after he asked her to put her dog on a leash. That same day, George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police officers. People began linking the racism of Karens, like Amy Cooper, to wider and more lethal instances of systemic racism and police brutality. But what do Karens really think about their name being used as a pejorative?
I was a little upset. A part of me really did think about who could I complain to about this meme.
When the Karen meme started gaining traction, I was horrified, obviously, because the name has a negative connotation to it now, and I didn't really want people to associate me.
Not liking the Karen meme is something a Karen and a Karen would do.
When I first encountered the Karen meme, honestly, I didn't even connect it to myself because I know that I'm not like that.
I have a duty as like a good Karen to prove that there are exceptions to the name, and it doesn't really bother me anymore because I know the meme isn't attacking my name per se, but rather it's labeling a certain type of person.
We have a knack for turning our hurt to humor, but my only concern would be that the Karen meme just stays a meme and it doesn't evolve and it doesn't move towards any sort of action.
In 2019, Oregon passed a bill to punish racist 911 callers, attempting to put a stop to people like the Central Park Karen. In July, a San Francisco supervisor introduced the Karen Act, which stands for Caution Against Racially Exploitative Non-Emergencies. Hopefully, with some reflection and change, this type of racist person can be a thing of the past. Let's all work together and kill Karen. I mean, not the person, the need for the meme. Kill the need for the meme. That, the Karen in quotes. You get it. You get it.
Didn't know if you took care of everything, man. You ready?
I don't know, bro.
You sound a little bit low, so I don't think you have the echo.
So, well, we were talking about Karen, and one thing I wanted to say about Karen is that Karen is reminiscent of Carolyn Bryant, the one who accused Emmett Till of whistling at her. She admitted on her deathbed that Emmett Till did not whistle at her. Most of the time, Karen is gatekeeping in a sense, as most of them want you to prove you are legally doing what you're doing and or legally dwelling in typically white geographical areas. So basically, Karen is asking you, do you belong here? Is this legally yours? Blah, 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 blah. And usually Karen is giving black people the benefit of the doubt. Giving white people the benefit of the doubt, and then asking black people, you know, let me see your key fob, let me see your pool pass. Do you have a permit for this? You know, and they let it be known that there is a black man and understand the consequences of calling the mob in the past or the police today. So Karen is dangerous and has a keen understanding of the racial hierarchical system. If she says, you know, I'm a white woman, I'm being attacked by a black man, the police will come running. Due to the previous mob mentality and frontier justice that was spoken about. So we can talk about Miss Ann, and I thought Miss Ann came from the 20s. I thought Miss Ann came from the 20s, but it appears that Miss Ann existed in the slave times. But Miss Ann probably changed in the 20s when a group of women during the Harlem Renaissance they became basically benefactors. They, you know, gave money to black artists and black activists during the Harlem Renaissance, and so I found some information on it. So Miss Ann is a dismissive name given to white women from an older time, the predecessor to Karen. The pejorative term pops up in literature from time to time to describe what we also today call a white feminist liberal. However, the term isn't always positive considering the complexity of the relationship between the white female benefactors and the black artists and activists they supported during the Harlem Renaissance. I believe this term was used in the 20s and 30s to sometimes describe the white women who participated in the Harlem Renaissance. These women whom history seldom mentions or takes seriously, sometimes because of their divergence from the actual soul of the Harlem Renaissance. However, at times they were helpful and beneficial. These relationships between the white female patrons and the artists and activists they supported became convoluted. This sentiment during the Black Renaissance of Harlem was due to the feckless nature of some of these white women. Some were privileged, some were rich, bored, or in the movement of the Harlem Renaissance for self-gratification or just, you know, riding the wave of some black trendy new fad. Some took the movement and centered themselves as the de facto leaders of a black movement, poking their noses where they don't belong, or like an overzealous ally, if you will, at that time. For example, Nancy Cunard, a British wealthy steamship heiress who was raised on a decadent English estate, was once quoted as saying, "I speak as if I were myself a Negro." Carla Kaplan, the author of Zora Neale Hurston, A Life in Letters, explains. Hurston breathes life in the idea of Miss Ann as a cultural figure and dissects the paradoxical nature of her life and specifically the condition of the interracial connections between white patronage and the social boundaries of American racism, particularly during the Harlem Renaissance. The author focuses on 6 of the white women of the Harlem Renaissance: Kaplan, Kaplan differentiates the Miss Anne as a counterpart of the flapper, or the new woman of the Roaring Twenties. And the flapper was like considered like a free woman, like she was carefree. She drank alcohol, she danced, she partied, she smoked. And the Miss Anne is she was conscientious of the time and social issues, and kind of like an opposite to that. So the author made a catalog, or a group biography of the women and their idiosyncrasies that made them individuals. The writer plus the anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston call them, and I quote, Negrotarians, categorizing these white patrons as a diverse crew full of good intentions, startling blind spots, and astonishing self-confidence. So this was all going on while women was trying to vote. You had a bunch of women also trying to, help black people at the same time. So
I'm gonna go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
No, because I don't. I'm liking it, but I am just curious. I'm looking at it like this, just like I said, over a catalog of 60 different women. I'm looking at the character Miss Anne from what was shown in the video. Is vastly different from the Anne that you described here, and what you were just talking about. So at some point, the Miss Anne, figure or stereotype, if we want to call it that now, because I think it's more of a stereotype than a racial epithet. But this Miss Anne figure transformed at some point. So I don't know. I was going to ask a little bit about that, but actually that would just be like going off the beat. So go ahead and you carry on. I was just making an observation, whatever, that the images changed. So I wonder if because the image changed, did the narrative about her change?
Well, that's a good question.
And then how?
Hey, I got an idea. Can you try muting your mic while I talk about Miss Anne?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So Miss Anne continued. The book Miss Anne in Harlem gives a little nod to the era's quieter patrons. Mary White Ovington, she was the founder of the NAACP. Amy Springhorn. The book mentions the more divisive, more poignant disseminators of complicated questions concerning racial identity. I spoke about some of them becoming the self-appointed expert on African American life, particularly Nancy Kennard, who published an 855-page anthology called The Negro. An anthology, Nancy Kennard was the rich heiress from England who had only visited America briefly. So she wrote an anthology called The Negro, and she had only barely visited America. There was also Charlotte Osgood Mason, who was an alleged anti-Semite and a collector of African art, who demanded her proteges refer to her as godmother. The author urges us to take them seriously because their emotional, outrageous expression of cross-racial solidarity was a way to get to the crux of the questions about racial identity. Miss Anne's, like Josephine Codgel Schuler, the white daughter of a Klan member and the wife of the African American journalist George Schuler, she collaborated anonymously on much of his work under several pseudonyms or pen names that made it into his journal regularly. And she did this under several pseudonyms, conveying like a false impression that there was this giant community of white women who shared her anti-racist views. And in the 1920s, nothing could be further from the truth. But I'm sure this helped loosen up a couple of minds and the ideas of America's peculiar social order. These Miss Anns, they were a part of the vanguard of the idea of race as a socially constructed concept. She fought against the perverse logic of the one drop rule. One drop of black blood makes you drop, makes you black, not a drop, makes you black. She lauded the distinctive nature of black culture. On her wedding night, she wrote, "The Anglo Saxon, especially, is spiritually depleted. America must mate with the Negro to save herself." Now, that was hella extra. That would be, to say that, to say the least, that would be hella extreme today. And for her to say that in the 20s and 30s is just like really wild. So these Miss Anns of the Harlem Renaissance were considered by their own race traitors and sometimes sexual deviants. The big question these Miss Anns asked was, what is race anyway? If we could suspect in that time that race was a myth, we could imagine racial identity as something based on affiliation rather than blood. This is what many writers of the Harlem Renaissance asked. In Nella Larson's Passing, which was about a mixed black woman who was passing as white, and Weldon Johnson's autobiography of an ex-colored man, people who could pass for white were breaking down the feudalness of race by showing that with careful presentation and lighter skin, one could circumvent this social construct. Miss Ann didn't walk this line without opposition. White critics thought of this at the time as an ideology of a sex-crazed degenerate. Her desire to speak for others labeled her as problematic in the black community as well. This Miss Ann is a complicated figure, but she is a reminder of a time when they thought a post-racial society would better America, but they were light years away from it. Their mingling with the so-called Negro was potentially dangerous to them, if not just deleterious socially to them, to say the least. And not to give Miss Ann of the Harlem Renaissance credit, because a lot of black people thought she was, butting her nose in and not there for the right reason, but their tenacity and their audacity to go against the grain of the American pecking order at that time is courageous, to say the least. So maybe the word evolved later on, and it's easy to see why it may have changed. So yeah, that's it. That's Miss Ann. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I wondered if why that changed. I do know that what you were saying earlier, and I'll go back and highlight the Josephine Schuler when she stated that there was a giant community of white women who shared her anti-racist views. I wonder if she was telling the truth, because I remember in North Carolina, the Wilmington, North Carolina, that riot where they overthrew the government was because there were some things put into the paper where they were talking about a lot of white women were looking at African American men as suitable partners. And so I guess there was maybe this, thing to date, a black man at that time. There may have been some kind of phenomenon there where it was just exciting or something. I don't know. It is very interesting because Josephine Schuler here was the daughter of a Klan member, but to wife to a very dark George Schuler. I think it's George S. Schuler is what she's talking about. So when we look at that kind of stuff, it's just kind of like, maybe there was something there. Maybe there was a larger community there, but this incited all the riots of the 1920s. Because the 1920s, there's a lot of frontier justice going on. There's a lot of burning down villages and things. And we'll be talking about that at a future Panther and Cage. But yeah, I just wonder. All that is just theory. It's just a discussion. I'm not saying that was the case. I'm just saying maybe. I don't know. Let me move back because we need to finish up, Karen. That was very interesting to talk about when we're talking about Miss Ann. So
Yeah, it seems crazy.
Turn now to that confrontation that was caught on camera, sparking outrage overnight. A white woman calling the police after a black man says he asked her to leash her dog in Central Park. TJ Holmes joins us with what they're both saying this morning. Good morning, TJ.
There's an African American man threatening my life. Robin, those are the exact words this woman used in a frantic manner on 911. And so much of the outrage you mentioned, Robin, that is there this morning has to do with what many people perceive as her attempt to threaten and weaponize the police against a black man. This on-camera confrontation making headlines overnight.
Please take your phone off.
Please don't come close to me. You're hearing the voice of 57-year-old Chris Cooper, who says his request for this woman to keep her dog on a leash quickly escalated.
Should I taking pictures calling the cops?
Please call the cops. Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African American man threatening my life.
Please tell them whatever you like.
Once she's on the phone with 911, you can hear her tone change.
There is an African American man. I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. I'm being threatened by a man in the ramble. Please send the cops immediately.
Cooper says he was bird watching in Central Park just after 8 a.m. on Monday when he came across the woman with her dog unleashed against park rules.
I said to the young woman, I said, dogs in the ramble have to be on the leash at all times.
Cooper claims she refused. That's when he says he used treats to try to lure the dog away from some plant beds just before he began recording.
They don't like it when you feed their dog treats. And she didn't like that at all. And she immediately grabbed the dog, as you can see from the video, and started hauling it around by its collar.
New York police confirm officers did respond to a reported assault, but says there were no arrest or summons issued for what they described as a verbal dispute. Speaking to a local New York station, the woman in the video apologized to Cooper, saying it was unacceptable, and I humbly and fully apologize to everyone who's seen that video, everyone that's been offended, everyone who thinks of me in a lower light, and I understand why they do. Adding that she was fearful because she says before the video began, Cooper had been yelling and offering her dog unknown items. The video quickly taking over Twitter's trending topics with more than 130,000 tweets, many calling for the woman to be fired. And overnight, her employer announced on Twitter that she will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation, adding, "We take these matters very seriously, and we do not condone racism of any kind."
Now, so we can finish this one up, wrap this bad boy up. Let me highlight a comment, several comments actually. No problem, Mrs. Brewer. Absolutely no problem. I want to say in that video, going back to BJ, yeah, dog on the porch. And if you notice how she was treating the dog, she was actually lynching the dog. She was calling the police to have them pretty much lynch Mr. Cooper there. And, you know, in the process, she, you know, like in the video, as you can see, she's lynching the dog. So there's something to this. And with her reaction, this was so played out and played out so well. Her reaction was to call the cops, and then she started to frantically overreact. And she knew what she was doing. No matter what apologies she makes, the theatrical performance here was one of the greatest. I thought I was watching the Django again. Django. The D is silent. No. So as we're watching this and we see her play this out, we see her say, I'm gonna tell them that an African American man is threatening my life. She literally did pull the monologue and let him know that this was her intention. So I did express the interest in this, and as you can see there, that last bullet point, that the overreaction reveals a mental instability, and that mental instability is fed by fear. This very strange fear. What that is that's some psychological phenomenon they call transference. You guys look that up and look into that. You're going to find that this is very interesting when we're talking about this, because this seems to occur later in life or the middle age, if we're looking at this as a scientific trend. So I just, to me, I thought that was just extremely interesting because the next slide is going to show you something different. It's going to be about the younger version of what a Karen would be. Yeah, BJ, man, premeditated. She thought the whole thing out. She knew how it was supposed to play out in her head, and she literally went into acting. I mean, you can see the video again. She was just like, she started to, there's a man attacking me in the park. It was like, oh my God, like, really? And you just stood there. Cameras are a wonderful thing in this situation. The camera and the audio together. So yeah, but I don't want to beat this dead horse down too much. Let's move forward. All right. So now we're talking about a younger version of what a Karen would be, but this would be a Becky. All right. At times, when we see Black women wearing box braids, crochets, Marley twists, and any other type of hairstyles that embrace the African heritage or the African American culture, we can appreciate the benefits and the successes that have been long used to socially separate and denigrate people of color. What some people have failed to understand is that a lot of the hairstyles that come from the African heritage actually protect your hair. They're protective hairstyles. They keep your hair from the harsh weather, from damaging it, and colonialists define that as bad hair. The natural kinky hair that is constantly targeted when school boards come together to create policy and legislation that bans Afrocentric hairstyles. It can be acceptable when Kim Kardashian flashes it as a unique and urban hairstyle, but it's a really big slap in the face of Black people. How societies are willingly accepting of this new exotic form of fashion when a white woman uses her privilege to, it shows that the influence Black womanhood has and has seen signs of forward progress to some, but to others, it can be seen as an attack on Black womanhood for African American feminism. Now, last week we showed in Racial Epithets, we showed, I think it was the Negress slide we talked about, how common it was for modern society to continue perpetuating this image of a masculine figure for a standard of Black womanhood, because they tried to manipulate and take the strength and use that in a negative fashion to portray Black women. This is what appears to be that, what I've discussed with certain women about a chip on Black women's shoulder. It's not really a chip on the shoulder. There's a reason why. This is the reason why. So if you're in there in the audience and you're curious about that, now is the time you want to ask this question. Because right now I'm ready to talk about it. You ask me later, and we're gonna probably be moving forward on progress, okay? So, but if you watched last week's Panther and Cage, and you should have if you're following this one, you guys should remember the caricature of the image of Michelle Obama sporting broad shoulders. And I think there's the other image too, where it shows Serena Williams having a meltdown like she was a baby or something. We talked about how Eurocentricity was consistently pushing these exaggerated images that clearly attack the Black womanhood, using their strength that they've used to endure 400 plus years of oppression against them, and basically pushing that into the modern times. Some of those caricatures that we saw were modern. They were from, I believe, called the Independent, I think it was, or one is called the Freedom or something. It's the Independent. Yeah, they constantly push out those exaggerated images, and they are an attack on Black womanhood. So those are some of the things that we're seeing when we see some of these things. Is cultural appropriation that's happening. All right. I'm seeing other comments. Yeah, when you see these kind of images, like the ones to my left here, with white women proudly sporting this urban look, while at the same time Black women are passed up on promotions because they don't fit the image of a standard of Eurocentric beauty, it creates a culture within a culture. Short-term terms like Becky here. that can be used as a racial stereotype to not only slur but to identify young culturally appropriating white women and calling them out of that name. Okay, so what this means is that the term Becky is obviously not completely interchangeable with the term Karen, but it's a stereotype which is used to become a racial epithet. It is very controversial and currently being discussed on tons of social media boards and forums. What we're finding is that the solution has been based in diversity. And because I'm not because I am not a Black woman, I really don't want to speak in depth on this. But we have been trying to welcome all the queens who would like to, be represented in moments like this. So this is a conversation that we hope to have generated previously, but we've had some have been unsuccessful somewhat in trying to find a Black queen that would like to talk about this issue as freely as we do here on Panther and Cage about other topics. So before we get any deeper into whether we saw the creation of this slur is warranted, we want to wait for a strong female Afrocentric perspective to bless us with her opinion on this matter. This is one of those terms that is currently evolving right now, and it actually is at the center of a lot of relationships that have been binded in chaos right now, or just some animosity there. So this issue is a hot button issue. I know this is something that white women ask me whenever I get them, alone, and they do ask about these questions, and it's relevant. It is absolutely relevant, but the discussion has to be had. So there's a lot that goes into this to unpack the other side of this. So we're waiting on that conversation. Cage, is there anything you want to say about the Becky slot?
Yeah. Can you mute your mic for a minute? Yeah. So what I wanted to point out is that there is a really good video by Amanda Steinberg. She's from the Hunger Games. She's the little Black girl named Rue, and the first one who gets killed. She's a lot older. She starred in a movie called The Hate U Give, and when she was younger, I think maybe 9th grade, 10th grade, she did this video on cultural appropriation. And the thing with cultural appropriation is that the reason why Black people say it is because it looks bad on us, but it looks good on them. So when you see braids on a Black girl, it's ghetto. It's as Paul Mooney would call ya bangy. Ya bangy big butt, ya bangy bimbo. And so when you get into these ideas of body types and hairstyles that are known to genuinely be Black, they are seen with negative connotation. But if you put those same things on somebody white, then it becomes transcendent, it becomes exotic, it becomes special, it becomes it transforms into something else. Whereas you have little Black kids being suspended from schools, and that's the issue with charter schools as well, is that charter schools don't abide by the federal law, so they can discriminate against hair and religion. It doesn't matter. So you have areas like Louisiana that are strictly charter school. So what does your kid do if they're Muslim, or what I'm saying, or they have dreads that they've been growing since they were born or whatnot. So, but when they're on other kids, it's okay. So when you get into cultural appropriation, we get into people like Rachel Dolezal. Rachel Dolezal was pretending to be Black. There's another woman, I can't remember her name, Jessica Krug. Jessica Krug was recently found out to be doing the same thing. She was a professor at George Washington University, and some students were like, yo, I don't think this lady is Black. She doesn't look Black. I don't know. and so she wrote this apology, and I have the apology here. Uh, Jessica Shrug revealed that she has been pretending to be black for her entire adult life. In a Medium post titled "The Truth and the Anti-Blackness of My Lies," Krug reveals that she is neither a black woman nor an unrepentant, unreformed child of the hood, as she now infamously wrote in her author bio, but rather a white Jewish woman who was raised in a suburb outside of Kansas City. To an escalating degree over my adult life, Krug wrote, I have eschewed my life experience as a white Jewish child in suburban Kansas City under various assumed identities within a blackness that I had no right to claim. First, North African blackness, then US rooted blackness. And so you have these white women who have appropriated blackness. Now this is what's crazy. I was listening to Grapevine, and Grapevine was a forum where these young Black American people, they talk about these issues. Most of them are educated, go to college or military, or and they have these forums where they talk. And they were talking about Shrug, the professor I was just talking about, and Rachel Dolezal. What they noticed is that these women were using the hierarchical system of colorism to jump in the upper echelons of Black society, whereas in white society they didn't have the best grades, they weren't the best looking. In white society they were average. But when they made this jump over, because even in Black society there's a hierarchical system based on color. So the lighter you are, the lesser problems you have. So when they jump over into blackness with this super light skin, this super exotic look, they get elevated by white scholars. They get elevated by the NAACP. This is why Rachel Dolezal was able to jump up into the position that she was able to jump into. And this is why cultural appropriation is super complex and kind of dangerous in a way, because people can infiltrate and if I don't believe Shrug or Dolezal were in there trying to infiltrate for CIA or anything like that, but it lets you know how easily someone that's just a little bit darker can infiltrate us based upon that social order system of color that Black people don't understand. And also the blackness on white people is good and blackness on Black people is bad. I love my culture, don't get it twisted, but I'm just saying that is what happens with culture appropriation. All right, that's it, man. That's all I wanted to add. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Nah, I got that, man. Yeah, that's very interesting because I want to go into something else and talking about the NAACP and how it was rumored that Rosa Parks was selected because of her lighter skin. She wasn't the first one to refuse to give up her seat on the bus, but we're not going to get into that because we're already an hour and we're halfway through this thing. Guys are going to try to make it short, but this is a lot to unpack. This is going to move forward a little more smoothly, but we just want to talk about that. So if anybody had any other comments for Becky, go ahead and put those in. We'll try to get some more information about this later. This definitely will be a discussion, and the reason being is because we are eventually going to get to this conversation about interracial relationships that is going to be very explosive, very interesting. And I'm going to want a lot of participation because we tried to have this conversation earlier, but because of I guess the priority on some others' minds that, the interracial relationships wasn't one that was, top of their list. So we'll get back to it because it is very important, especially when we discuss this relationship, the interracial relationships of the 1920s. That's going to be extremely interesting. So we'll bring that Miss Ann character back, and there's going to be a lot of unpacking that we're going to be able to do. But for the purposes of time, we're going to move forward to the next racial epithet, and that is going to be something Cage is going to be working on.
All right, boy. Boy. So, boy may seem rather innocuous on the surface. I mean, what is a boy? It is the younger version of what a man becomes. Very simple. But when you add the context of what it means to the South and to black man, the term becomes a double entendre. Boy has two meanings. The term boy was used mostly to uh, assert the dominance of white men over black men. The Constitution clearly states all men are created equal, but it clearly left out the point where only white men are created equal. And in the South, black men were not treated as human and definitely not respected as men. There is a certain respect that men give other men, a social right men give to one another. You cannot speak to a man respectfully the same way you would a boy. You can't ask a grown man, you can't ask a grown man who you do not know certain questions. You can't ask a grown man, hey, where are you going? You can't tell him what to do, to shut up. The level of disrespect that comes with this is unprecedented when it comes to the South and the pejorative term boy. Boy would be used to address black men in many aspects of their lives, at work, in policing, in their everyday trips to the store. The black man was beholden to the idea of himself as as a perpetual proverbial child, no matter what their age. Boy and nigger were among two of the favorite epithets in the United States, especially in the South. Boy sounds rather ambiguous again on its own. However, the proof is in the pudding. The black codes in the wake of the Civil War prevented the free flow of labor and economic freedom for black people. In late 1865, Mississippi and South Carolina enacted the first black codes. Basically, these laws required black people to sometimes be forced into employment contracts or pay an annual fee for not having a job as a farmer or a servant. So you had to pay for not being the same kind of jobs that they were offering during slavery. So most of these laws were subject to penalties ranging from prison time or being leased right back to the same plantation that they were freed from. The rest of the southern states followed suit, and the black codes were the predecessor to the infamous Jim Crow laws that we all know and love. But these codes existed for hundreds of years. These laws imposed by the state, sometimes the federal government kept black men from supporting themselves and their families. Uh, these laws these laws kept a lot of men in bondage despite the Emancipation Proclamation, because all throughout history, every single one of these laws that are enacted, the dominant society, aka white people, no offense, but they think the problem is solved. All throughout history, every single act passed law through Congress or whatnot. Uh, but there was a social law as well, an expected set of rules that stripped black men and women of their sovereignty as adults. And in this in this great nation of freedom, the paradoxical nature is easy to see, but it is seldom acknowledged. Historian Ronald L. F. Davis of California State University, Northridge, he weighs in. Most Southern whites, Americans who grew up prior to 1954, expected Black Americans to conduct themselves according to well understood rituals of behavior. This racial etiquette governed the actions, manners, attitudes, and words of all Black people when in the presence of whites. To violate this racial etiquette placed one's very life and the lives of their family at risk. Blacks were expected to refer to white males in position of authority as boss or captain, a title of respect that replaced master or massa, used in slave times. Sometimes the white children of one's white employer or a prominent white person might be called massa to show special respect. If a white person was well known, a black servant or hired hand or tenant might speak somewhat in intimate terms, addressing that white person as Mr. John or Miss Mary. All black men, on the other hand, were called by their first names or were referred to as boy, uncle, old man, regardless of their age. If the white person did not personally know the black person, the term nigger or nigger fellow might be used in legal cases and the press and the press. Blacks were often referred to by the word as Negro with a first name attached, such as Negro Sam. At other times, the term Jack or some common name was universally used in addressing black men not known to the white speaker. And there you go, Panther. Don't forget to mute your mic. Unmuted.
Yeah. Now, last week, Cage discussed the derogatory connotation for the N-word and raised some questions that challenged the idea of black inferiority. We talked about the first documented shipment of African Americans in 1619, the first documented now, which listed them as nigars. Okay, and I say that I spell that as Negars. Apologize for the racial epithets we have to discuss, but this is for educational purposes. It's absolutely a must because we continue to try to move forward with the assumption that others are working from the same basis, the same knowledge. So because we have not reached that level, we have to actually lay this foundation of groundwork for future conversations and for the sake of progression. So now whether we did talk about that sometimes people would distinguish the term nigger to nigga to Negro. And we unequivocally know that it has a negative impact upon the collective black consciousness altogether.
Train of thought.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the N-word and like the use of that in rap music, because obviously as a white person I've been brought up never to ever use that word, but a lot of the music I listen to says it 20 times in every song.
Yeah, sure.
So I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that and like whether you think it's a word that's become obsolete or whether you think that there are negative consequences on the fact that it's so widely used.
I very much do. I used to be someone who used the word all the time, as some of you may or may not know. I came to a stage in my life where one of my elders said to me, "You're better than that." And I started reading a bit more. I started studying the history of the word. I started looking at the brutality that had been underpinned by this word. Let me be clear, I'm not against people using the word. I'm just against the stupid idea that it's now become a term of endearment. It hasn't. It has so much blood attached to it. For me, it means what it's always meant. It is a term of white supremacist genocide. It is a word that says African people are not human. It was a way of reducing people to subhuman status, which led to, as I've said, to people being put in zoos or public lynchings in America, where someone could literally be barbecued in public and people thought it was perfectly acceptable to bring their child, give their child the day of school to come and watch a person be barbecued in public. Rail systems would operate special lynching day rail cards. After the lynching, there'd be postcards with the dead person on front of it. They'd send out as souvenirs. So this is the history behind that word. If we look at early hip-hop, when hip-hop was a bit more independent, when hip-hop was owned a bit more by the black community, we see that hip-hop was completely offensive to everyone. People would say cracker, they'd say honky, they'd say nigger. You'd have Ice Cube making inappropriate songs like Black Korea. You'd have songs, NWA songs that were about killing black people. Hip-hop was just completely like punk. It was just offensive to everyone. But someone decided somewhere it was no longer acceptable to say cracker and honky and those kind of words, but nigger was okay.
Now, last week we touched on the N-word quite a bit, but we thoroughly discussed this and how the word possessed a great depth and meaning, and it can be pervasive in its totality. This is the reason the last bullet last week on the slide said was nigger more than a racial epithet. Okay, we discussed this word and how it derived from a Latin origin meaning black, and it wasn't hard to see that everyone knows the word. Everyone knows the word means black, and that it's often pronounced negro. Okay, but we talked about this this individual who flew on JetBlue last week, and he used the N-word several times, indirectly and directly to people. And he even spoke it to indirectly, but in response to a stewardess, JetBlue stewardess, who after he said the word at least once or twice more, and then called her bitch, she then retreated and backed up, and it seemed like a hostile work environment for her. So we mentioned that. We did have a conversation about the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court Justice of the United States. We talked about her, Amy Coney Barrett, and how she talked about her past ruling that use of the N-word does not create a hostile work environment. So we kind of talked about her and Donald Trump possibly being out of touch. And we didn't get a lot of feedback on that, but we're still looking for information. Anytime you can jump in, because there's a lot that we're going to be talking about when we get to police reform. But we didn't want to talk about in depth last week. So it was just because of the early etymology of the N-word, it failed to capture that this word essentially is a generalization that's disconnected as people, our people, and is used to describe as being Shemite or of Hebrew or Akkadian descendants. And all of this transliteration was lost in the process of the European colonization that continued to plague the world over. This is where the word Negro just glosses over the reason why it was created, the reason for the creation of such a word. Somehow we've all been fooled into defining a people and their ethnicity through the color that's found in a simple crayon box versus the varying nuances associated with the different tribes and cultures. All right, there's no dipsy do or switcheroo that's going to hide this for everybody. So when we talk about the N-word, yes, it is much more than a racial epithet. So last week we talked about what the word nigger made a hostile work environment because of the past ruling that we were just talking about with Amy Coney Bryant. She said the N-word does not make a hostile work environment. So I don't want to highlight that video again, but we just talked about that. The video ended where the guy was removed by Jamaican law enforcement officials. And then we watched another portion of that video where he attempted to get onto a flight with, on American Airlines trying to fly from Jamaica to New York again. And he said the N-word again, and it resulted in him quickly exiting the fight. It was noticed that he was asking about the emergency exits and inquiring if anyone had a lighter. And it all seemed to be very suspicious to me. But the point is that the usage of the N-word created a very anxiety-thickened environment pretty quickly, right, on both flights. So we concluded that one when we talked about the questioning if Donald Trump and Amy Coney Barrett were out of touch in regards to racial sensibilities. I think that it was absolutely necessary that we're going to be appointed as, if she's going to be appointed as Supreme Court Justice for the rest of her life, that she understands race relations. Other than that, Cage, if you had anything that you wanted to say before we move forward.
Well, I did, but for the sake of time, let's just move on, I suppose. All right. So, did you want to talk on this first?
Yeah, let me go ahead and just knock it out real quick. I'm just going to quickly make reference. Well, yeah, cultural appropriation, an adoption or co-opting, usually without acknowledgement of a cultural identity markers associated with or originating in the minority communities by people of or communities with a relatively privileged status. All right, so that's the definition of cultural appropriation. That's the biggest thing that we're going to hit here when we're talking about this racial epithet of wigger. All right, you can see it's a very racist mix of the words white and nigger. Okay, it is intended to identify a person of European descent who is basically, picking out, the different African American subcultural nuances to perpetuate. All right, and he does this like Case just expressed earlier for the Beckys, how they do this to enjoy status that they could not receive in their, I guess, social category, if you will. But here the emphasis is placed on the perception of the cultural identity markers primarily associated with people of color or African Americans, right? To believe that, you know, and we're looking at this image of James Franco in the, what's the name of the movie, Cage? Spring Breakers?
Spring Breakers.
Yeah. So we're looking at James Franco and his character and how he is apparently, you know, seeming to bask in the privilege of criminality here, I guess. If you think that criminality is a cultural identity marker for people of color or African Americans, it's evidence of two things: short-sighted and self-inflated ignorant, and that you succumb to the social engineering that we talked about in the previous Panther and Cage. We talked about the Pavlovian conditioning. All right, so you succumb to that social engineering, and it conditions you to see from a racialized education, and it leaves one lacking a true sense of objectivity. So this Wigger is this is a big one. All right, this one I see happen a lot as I was growing up. They were white guys, and it's not all, but just some that took it to the extreme. These are the ones that I'm talking about, that would utilize this opportunity to jump over what appeared to be a racial line or glass ceiling, for that matter, to try to use this privilege to poison our own community, to poison our community. And I noticed that the trend that I always see when it comes to Wigger is this will be used to benefit them in their youth. And then when they reach a certain age where you can't be in the club after 33 or so, you just can't be in there. So at a certain age or whatever, then all of a sudden they up and find religion or something or whatever it is, and they change their life or whatnot, and then everything is absolved. They spend the last part of their life trying to make amends after having lived their life this way. You still see them today. Most of the time, they always say, "Oh, I dated black women," that kind of thing. And it's kind of, I've seen it a lot, especially where I am now. And in Coco also, it's kind of like it's really disturbing. So other than that, I just want to quickly say that. Cage, you go ahead and take the mic.
Yeah, so basically the term Wigger is basically just sliding the social stigma of the N-word to a white person. And we can make the argument that, this is a stereotype, but some white people might argue this is the way that black people just are. So basically, this term Wigger is someone who is imitating or assimilating black culture. And again, white people who understand what it means in this country, and the negativity and pathology behind blackness, they find this very weird. Like if you understand, what they say about black people, right? And you believe that. And then you see a white person, taking the shroud of privilege off, taking the shroud of being genetically superior off, right? And then they find it very weird that this white person would lower themselves purposely. However, on the other hand, Asians and black people who assimilate to more white culture or more Eurocentric culture, they get no flack. People like Candace Owens, those are successful black people. Those are the good ones per se. Asian people that do not have Asian accents, that do not, that have assimilated in every way, language and culture, whatever. They may keep their Asian roots, but you hear no accent, you hear no change in whatever. Like that is completely normal And when you see a black person, and even when a black person does assimilate, you still have other black people and white people saying, "Hey, you don't act black," but they don't say that to Asians. Asians are just known as smart, known as on top of things, the model minority, if you will. And I just wanted to point that out. That's it. I'm done on that.
Ah,
All right. I guess I'm taking this one too, huh?
yeah, you take the first one on this one. I got plenty to say, but go ahead and yeah.
All right. So the epithet cracker is much like boy in that it has more than one meaning. Obviously, we think of the food when we hear or think of the word cracker, but cracker has a bit of history to it, much like boy. And for the most part, most of this was unknown to me prior to doing a bit of research about epithets. But I found a very interesting article about the word, and I wanted to share some of its highlights. So, this article is from 2013 during the height of the George Zimmerman trial. Zimmerman was charged with the murder of Trayvon Martin during a scuffle. The key witness was a black teenager by the name of Rachel Jontel. Jontel was the key witness as she was on the phone with Trayvon in his last moments. Jontel stated Trayvon told her that a quote unquote creepy ass cracker was following him. She told Don West, Zimmerman's attorney, that the phrase wasn't racist. Don West argued that indeed it was. Now, the author of this article argued that the slur seemed antiquated or old, much like honky. He also references George Jefferson and not H.P. Rat Brown as the one who popularized this term. Um, and he works for NPR. I think Rat Brown is at the very least worth briefly mentioning, as well as Snick. Uh, but I don't know the writer's age, so maybe he just didn't do heavy research. So the author is right and wrong about honky and how old it is, but whatever. So back to Cracker. And I was talking about honky because that is what George Jefferson was saying. I think he might have said cracker too at times. Uh, According to Jelani Cobb, a historian at the University of Connecticut, cracker, the old standby of Anglo insults, was first noted in the 18th century, making it older than the United States itself. It was used to refer to poor whites, particularly those inhabiting the frontier regions of Maryland, Virginia, and Georgia. It is suspected that it was shortened. It was a shortened version of whip cracker, since the manual labor they did involved driving livestock with a whip. Not to mention the brutal arenas where those skills were employed, totally meaning slavery. Over the time, over the course of time, it came to present a person of lower caste or criminal disposition. In some instances, it was used in reference to bandits and other lawless folks. The term cracker has its origins in an epithet white people called other white people and has its roots as far back as the age of Shakespeare. I'm talking 17th century. The word has changed quite a bit over time in the last 4 centuries. At one point, cracker was used as a derogatory word white people would call another white person. Well, it was used as a derogatory word that white people would use to call other white people pompous assholes. Pardon my French. Cracker evolved and became a slur for immigrants, particularly the Scots Irish people who left North Ireland to avoid English rule, most likely. The Scots Irish would settle into the Carolinas and later move further down south to Georgia and Florida. And the state of Florida did not like these so-called crackers either. In official documents, the governor of Florida said, "We don't know what to do with these crackers. We tell them to settle, and they don't. We tell them not to settle, and they do." The cracker was a rogue, according to his Florida historian Dana St. Clair. Panther, I pass it to you.
That was an excellent portrayal, an excellent discussion. Very good information. But I do want to point out that how on the slide over to my left here that there's a contradiction where it first says, the second bullet, it says that it's early 19th century. You heard Cage talk about it being 18th century. And you can see there on the first bullet, it talks about the nickname of the 17th century colonists. I think Cage, you mentioned it about the 17th century also, Shakespearean age. However, I'm inclined, and I'm sure it's being the 17th century. I think it's more accurate for the first bullet because we know that when they were populating Florida, there was a lot that occurred in North Florida that we're going to be talking about in the future. It's going to shape the rest of Florida's history. I specifically just say this one incident or one thing. You guys can Google that, look at that, and find out where we're going to be heading there. When I say Negro Fort and Andrew Jackson, those things should be enough to fill all those blanks that you're probably coming up with if you're listening to this for the first time. Now, from fighting with the Spanish and the Native Americans all over the land. Remember, Florida was owned by Spain. All right. The pejorative term cracker was given to the colonists for a particular reason, and we're about to discuss that on the next slide. But the other contradiction was that this blanket statement says that the colonists were self-reliant, which is another slap in the face when we know that the colonists used African Americans as free labor on plantations. Now, dictionary definitions say things like that they were native of Georgia or Florida, which is another untruth so conveniently printed at the inconvenience of Native Americans. You found a term that stated that the word cracker in this sense often implies that the person was regarded as ignorant or uneducated when used by Black people. And we will show you how that's inaccurate in a moment. But what I want to talk about right now is that there is a museum over in Brandon, Florida called Cracker Country. Okay. Everybody go Google that, go check that out. It used to fly what was the largest Confederate flag in Florida. They still may fly it, but I'm not sure because I haven't seen the museum recently. But you can go over to the website and check it out, as it states that it's located on the Florida State Fairgrounds, and is a museum that holds a collection of 13 original buildings dating from 1870 through 1912, which were relocated across Florida. Okay. The buildings recreate the lifestyles of the past, and costume interpreters portray daily living as Florida pioneers. Now, I remember coming across this website back in 2011 and saw a gross misrepresentation of slaves, and the information that they provided additionally was mismatched. All right. I do believe that the website at the time said some of the slaves were happy to live the life of involuntary servitude, or maybe it said indentured servitude. In any case, I thought that it was absolutely horrible, especially since it was one of the places where my kids were taking a part of, we're on the approved field trips list. Okay. So you can go ahead and check the audience, or actually, I'm going to go ahead and put this, the link for that Cracker Country in the comments if I can. I'm going to see if I can get back on there now. You guys go check that out. All right. That is in the comments for the Panther and Cage page. So you guys go to the Panther and Cage Facebook page. Check that out. But we also briefly want to mention that this is also, the term cracker is also associated with redneck, but we're not going to discuss that in depth tonight because of time constraints. So unless the people are actually out there in demand that we do talk about it. Cage.
All right. So by the 1800s, those those immigrants began to wear the term cracker as a badge of honor and a term of endearment. Sound familiar? And the key is in the gesture of Black solidarity, the author states, I'm pretty sure this process of reappropriating a disparaging term sounds familiar to a lot of y'all. So this was a negative term that other white people were calling poor white people that settled in South Carolina and in Georgia and parts of Florida. The cracker was an insult, but then they started to call each other that. They took the word back, and you'll see this in other epithets too. That people of the same uh, social background, they'll call each other these negative terms as a term of endearment. It isn't essentially just a black thing. And the crackers also had their distinctive time intensive cuisine. They would make swamp cabbage, something called hoppin' john, and something called corn pone. And they favored architectural styles meant to make cooking in Florida's brutal southern summers more bearable. Uh, there were also baseball teams called the Crackers. According to Dana St. Clair, we've even had a cracker president. She said, Dana St. Clair said, Jimmy Carter is a cracker. He's an Oglethorpe from Celtic English cracker stock. I don't know if he knows, but I think Jimmy Carter would proudly call himself one. And that's what I got, Panther. I pass it back to you.
All right. In any case, moving forward, we see that the term cracker, and especially Florida cracker, came from the cracking sounds of bullwhips when the cattle rustlers would swing the whip, making it create the sound of a crack as they drove the cattle out from the underbush and onto what was known as the Florida Cracker Trail. That's something you guys want to Google and take a look at also. Very informative for you. Now, where this gets controversial, but I can tell you no one is fooled by this euphemistic denial, again, that continues to slither away from the accountability of Florida's history, right? Having a plantation was not an easy feat, right? So slave owners had to worry about revolts, as well as the news would travel from things, I think, like, was it Nat Turner? Nat Turner's revolt, and that news would travel. So there were things that were put in place to mitigate that issue. Things like the Willie Lynch letter, which we will not discuss tonight, but we'll put on a future Panther and Cage, and y'all gonna get that work when it comes to that one. That Willie Lynch letter is a doozy. It's going to probably require its own show, right? So because of those threats, such as runaway slaves, some slave owners would employ cattle rustlers, all right? And those cattle rustlers, let me go ahead and pull that over real quick so you guys can finish reading the rest of this. Those cattle rustlers would employ a skill of tracking through Florida's wilderness. All right, they would even round up posses to hunt runaway slaves that would attempt to flee. All right, now remember we talked about the vigilante justice, the posses, and the ochlocracy. This is where we're talking about slave patrols. Okay, slave catchers and the slave patrols. Now these individuals who would catch the runaway slaves and then beat them or punish them. These slave catchers, they were the ones that were using the whips on the backs of slaves. Okay, among these posses that they would round up, these vigilante justice, remember, and these posses they would round up was one that history documents as a slave catcher. Okay, the slave catcher was one who would utilize his skills and that he may have acquired through military scouts or just really skilled hunting in Florida, which is a huge pastime here in Florida. So when a slave was caught by the slave catcher, the slave was often punished. One of the most favorite forms of punishing was the lynching, of course, But that depended upon what the slave was charged with. Now, touch a white woman, you be lynched. You know, just try to run away because you were trying to find freedom. You make it you make it with the bullwhip, or get your foot cut off like Kunta Kinte. Another form was the lashings of the back, okay, via the same bullwhips that they were used to crack in the air to rustle cows. Now, if you look at the information when you start researching cracker, you'll find that they would crack the whips. Okay, we saw that earlier when it stated that they would never hit the cows because the cows were valued property. Okay, so they would crack the whip in the air to get the cattle to rustle, but the slave got that whip directly on the back. All right, so if cows were valued property, what the hell were the slaves? Anyway, the cracking sound of the whip, especially on the back of the slaves, is what gave the term the influence that created cracker as a racial slur. All right. Now, it's very important for everyone to see this and understand this. Okay. This is where law enforcement was created, from the slave patrols. Okay. So as you can see here, which states in the last bullet, used the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 as legal legitimacy to hunt a man. All right. Now, this required all citizens and local law enforcement to aid in the capture of all runaway slaves. They would even grab the U.S. federal marshals. And when we get to another Panther and Cage, where we're going to talk and we're going to show some more information about the slave patrol specifically, we're going to come across the federal nigger hunting license. Yes, this actually existed. So when we talk about that, it's going to be somewhat revolutionary, because I know a lot of people are not understanding. They're not getting it when we talk about systemic and institutionalized racism. When they say it doesn't exist, here's your evidence right here. Okay, need to do your history, you guys. You're getting a head start. I'm telling you about it. I'm not even going to talk about in depth about it, but you're getting a head start right here. Okay, so over to my left, your evidence. I'm done in talking about the slave catcher, the slave patrols. We'll talk about that on another show with slave markets and how all that fits in. But yes, armed organized white groups were monitored and enforced discipline on black slaves, and this is the creation of law enforcement in America. Okay, it was created first by Bobby Peel over in England. They called them the Bobbies. That's why they keep that name. But remember, we were trying to create a new country. We were trying to get away from England and its habits, but we seem to somehow have found a way to create a law enforcement, and it was created from, like the Electoral College, it was created from the threat of slaves. We'll talk about that with Williams Letters, the Nat Turner Revolt. We'll talk about all that in the future Panther and Cage. But for right now, time constraints, we're going to move forward to the next slide. Unless you had something to say about that, Cage. All right.
All right. So when we get into red nigger, or red nigger, I suppose. Basically, in a previous Panther and Cage, I mentioned the word black and its etymology within Latin-based languages or European-based language. The word black is negative in origin, and when it's used as a prefix or put in front of another word to make a combination, black has the potential to make a word negative or create a new word entirely. And I gave examples before. For instance, blackballed, blacklisted, black male. Um, Black has origins in words like black magic, black sacrament. And the point that I'm trying to make is the word nigger is associated with the lowest caste of the American social order. And in my opinion, nigger acts as a suffix, putting a word at the end of another word to create another word. the same way that black acts as a prefix at the beginning of a word. Attach nigger to the back end of another word, and the place on the social ladder changes dramatically in word and in sometimes action. The same is done here for red nigger or sand nigger or whatever you have it. So basically uh, the base meaning of these words are just meant to demean and let people know where you go on the American social ladder. And that's pretty much all I got to say about that one. It's just taking the same term and giving it to somebody else, basically.
Red nigger was a term that was used to identify and integrate Native Americans. All right, this term was also used to insult lighter skinned African Americans who were often known to have been sharing ancestry. Now, that has been controversial in times, but if you're following Panther and Cage and you saw us discuss the plantation plate, you would notice that the African Americans used cornbread as a part of the survival meal, which made up soul food. Yes, that's right. Because cornbread is a part of the soul food plantation plate, it's evidence that Native Americans and African Americans shared culture. Okay. I think I mentioned that's how cornbread was introduced as a part of the plantation plate, because the Native Americans had showed African Americans how to bake corn into bread. Okay. Now the terms prairie nigger, timber nigger, and swamp nigger were all insults against Native Americans. The term red nigger was used in several different ways. It was used as a racial diss against Native Americans or people of mixed Native American ancestry. And it was used as an insult against African Americans with light skin, regardless of their ancestral mix. Okay. So Native Americans were also placed side by side or barely above African Americans on the racial hierarchy. All right. Jim Crow laws and Jim Crow social etiquette often included prohibitions against social equality for the so-called Native Americans. And it refers to them as Indians here, which is very controversial. African Americans and Native Americans were denied white drinking water fountains, cafes, restrooms, movie theaters, libraries, swimming pools, and buses. The Native Americans were considered inferior to whites, and it was not uncommon to hear Native Americans refer to them as niggers or red niggers. All right. There are many terms like this that were based in terms for African Americans for lighter complexions. Terms like high yellow, red bone, for example. Yeah, I know a lot of us have heard those. I've heard them all. But what was interesting that I discovered in this research was that Zora Neale Hurston had grandparents that were Native American. And that was something I did not know. So I think that we'll probably talk about that again in the future, especially as we look at our apprentice here on this slide over to the left, and that it might explain why Zora Neale Hurston was living in this area. I'm not sure what there is a link to Native Americans in Central area, which probably will be uncovered when we start talking about Sanford, Florida. Now I say that as you can see this beautiful picture here, this woman shares African American and Native American ancestry. And so, yes, they do exist. You're listening to one of them, okay? I also want to make reference to the recent changing of the Washington Redskins name because of the historical disparagement of Native Americans. Now, that's a very long conversation, but for years they've known that this was disparaging to Native Americans. But it was very controversial that we had to discuss it, but if you guys are really up for it, we'll talk about it again in the future. You guys just ask a question. We'll see. I do have a comment. Let me check the comment really quick. Thank you, BJ. I appreciate it. Sorry this is so long. We're about to wrap up. I think we got one more after this, and then we are done. We had to lay the groundwork. So I think it's pretty clear, though, getting back to red nigger, guys. I think it's pretty clear whether you're dark skin or red skin. It still sounds like red nigger to me. So I remember watching an old Western with my grandmother, and I remember the term was used twice, and I kind of I was like, I really just sat back and was like, I never heard the word before. I think I was maybe 22 at that time, and my grandmother told me. She started telling me about the story, and it's just like one of the things that my grandmother's like, she didn't just volunteer the information, but if you asked her, then she'd tell you and just give you all the information. And she blew my mind that day, and I had no clue about the red nigger. And then when I actually started to actually do more interaction, and then right before I went into the military, I started hearing about the sand nigger, and little racial epithets such as that. So I hate saying this word, but it's very important for this show. I just wanted to share that really quick with you guys to say, like personally, this has had an effect on me. It does have a negative impact on us all. And I just wanted to just give that information to you guys. Cage, are you ready for the final? That's all you. You got to unmute your mic.
My bad. Dang. All right. So, honky is a slur for a person of European descent. As far as my research goes, honky has some legend to it and a few different meanings if you break it up. This epithet is an old one, and its use as one originates out of the 60s and 70s. And the etymology or origin of the word allegedly predates its use as an epithet. Legend has it that honky comes from a West African language called Wolof. It literally means red-eared person. And in my personal experience, I came across this word through a TV show called The Jeffersons, as showed in the pictures. But through my research, I have found that it was also popularized before the Jeffersons by a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Commission, or SNCC. They called it the SNCC, or SNCC, if you will. They are a lesser talked about mover and shaker during the civil rights movement, at least within the American school curriculum. I never heard of them really, not much in school or high school or whatnot. But they were very instrumental in the civil rights movement of the 60s and early 70s. And so was Stokely Carmichael. And we'll talk about him in another Panther and Cage, but he was SNCC's chairman, and he stepped down. And when he stepped down, a brother by the name of Hubert Gerald Brown, aka H. Rap Brown, took over. He was only the leader for a year, but he would really get down on this word and use it a lot. He was very authoritarian, and during his stint as the chairman of SNCC, the tensions and altercations with the police increased. He also was the chairman during the 6 month short collaboration between Black Panthers and SNCC. But we'll cover these. We'll cover both of them at another time. But he would use honky and popularize it in his speeches. This is probably how the word moved through society. Language is a living, breathing thing, and it changes, as you can see. And the word went all the way to Hollywood with the Jeffersons, perhaps. The other side of this is, if H. Rap Brown was the first to come up with this, where did he get it from? And the other man in the picture, not George Jefferson, the other two pictures, but Dick Gregory, he was an activist and a comedian, and I think an amateur historian of sorts. Um, he actually was like one of the first black people to like try to say that they were going to run for president. But according to Dick Gregory, honky originates from white men driving to the black part of town to pick up prostitutes. They would pull up, honk the horn, and that's kind of where it started. They would blow the horn, and they'd be like, "Oh, there go one of them honkies." But honky is one epithet that is seldom used and was more commonly used in the 60s and the 70s. It was mostly made into a joke by George Jefferson. Uh, by George Jefferson by the time he got a hold of it. But when people like the Black Panthers and people like H.G. Rap Brown would get a hold of it, honky was truly the name of the enemy and the black oppressor of the 60s and 70s. And so that is the origins of honky. And that's it. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I kind of working these little things over here, whatever, whatnot. So, yeah, that concludes tonight's racial epithets. There's more, but we're not going to cover these. We may actually put it together on another time. But we got a Panther and Cage freestyle coming up where we can talk about anything. So you probably bring it up on that one if you want to. We'll have all the information ready for you. And we'll do that. And then we're hoping to have a guest on. I'm not going to tell you who the guest is, but we're hoping to have a guest on it the next follow that Panther and Cage. But we are sorry that this took about an hour and 56 minutes so far. We're sorry it's taken a long time to unpack these things, but we have to lay this groundwork. And the reason why is because we've been having some progress in form of some of the solutions in the conversations that we're having. Obviously, we're moving forward because, they're not asking the crazy questions that, referred to us as animals and not deserving reparations. But we were trying to actually put forth and change the negative narratives that have been perpetuated throughout Brevard County. So we're actually putting this information out there. We greatly appreciate those who are monitoring, who are watching. Go ahead and say something if you'd like. If you want to see something or you got any ideas, continue to send me in my DMs if you like, or just put it onto the page. We can get you the information ahead of time. But anything that you guys think is important or can impact the race relations in our country right now today, try to get that information out. Don't wait till a protest is happening and you think it's the end of the world before you want to ask a question. But we just wanted to put this information out there. This has been heavy. We've been going heavy for the past 2 weeks. We've been going pretty heavy the last couple of months. But we're trying to get this information put down there so that therefore we have a working knowledge so that we understand. This is why there were a lot of people upset about the Redskins because it was like a shadow of red nigger, I learned this tonight, so that's the thing. So we're looking forward to putting that information out there for you guys. We greatly appreciate all their interaction and any of the viewing that you see and you want to hear something and want to talk about it. Like I said, reach out. It takes nothing but an email. Did you want to say anything else before we get out of here, Cage?
Can you mute your mic? Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, the shows get kind of long-winded, but if we don't talk about these things, you won't understand what we're talking about today. When someone makes an old racial epithet such as boy, like boy, for instance, when Rachel Jontel during the Trayvon Martin trial said that Trayvon had called Zimmerman a cracker, he said it wasn't racist, although there was a trial at Tyson Chicken Factory where the manager had called the employee boy, a black employee boy. Well, that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they ruled that it wasn't racist. And however, when you look at Zimmerman, they were arguing that cracker was racist. Now you got cracker. Cracker is a double entendre. It has two meanings. It means a food. It also means a white person. We went into that. When you look at boy, boy is a young man or a younger version of what's to become a man, and it's also like a pejorative term for a black person. So here you have two instances of the exact same thing with two totally different outcomes and two totally different meanings within the public eye. So if you understand the history of boy, which obviously the Supreme Court didn't, or they pretended to, if you understand the history, then you can understand why this black person got upset, because it's a historical epithet used to demean his people, and that's been passed down. That's our legacy. And so that's why this is important. That's why unpacking this is important. And sorry this is long-winded, but these things must be done. So that's all I want to say, man.
All right, guys. With that being said, we gave you the reason for it. We love you. We actually want to keep pushing this information and things like this to get us to a point of progress. So we're happy where we are. This is very labor intensive, guys, and it does weigh down on us sometimes. But we're going to keep giving you what you want. So like I said, reach out. And as always, we're getting out of here. As always, peace, love, and may the Most High guide your path.